Let me introduce you to this evening's speaker. Janice Williams is the lead of Object, the long-established group which campaigns on the topics of pornography, prostitution, sex clubs, gender ideology, and surrogacy. Object was the first feminist organisation to take on the trans issue. Janice is also a humanist celebrant, and she worked with Madeleine Burns and celebrated Madeleine's funeral. She sneaked into a Stonewall conference and spread the message, "Stop transing children," and was carried out by security. She also live tweeted Maya Forstetter's first tribunal case before tribunal tweets started. And you can see more at their website, objectnow.org/surrogacy. Her Twitter feed is @ObjectUK. And the links that we've got will be put in the chat as we go along. Now, hello, Janice. I think you wanted to dedicate this evening's event to 3 victims of this procedure.
Yes, there are 3 women whose names are very little known. Their names are Crystal Wilhite, Michelle Reeves, and Brooke Brown, who actually died from doing surrogacy. But because deaths from this cause are not recorded as such, they're only put down as being dying from pregnancy problems. And one of the big issues with surrogacy is that we have no proper statistics about how safe any of it is. So yes, I'd like to dedicate this this event to them, please.
Thank you. What I want to do is to ask you a few questions, and that will give you the opportunity to talk about this issue. I want you to tell me a little bit about Object and your connection with it.
Yes, I joined it back in the day. It started in 2008, founded by Dr. Sasha Rakoff, who now runs Not Buying It, campaigning against strip clubs. And it was basically set up to challenge the way women were portrayed in the media. It was always sexualized, always feminized, never on equal terms with men. And of course, that led us very swiftly into looking at the sex trades, pornography and prostitution. And Object was successful in getting a law change on prostitution. It wasn't a hugely impactful law change, but it made people look at it again. It's one of these things that everyone takes for granted, that it's okay, and of course it's not. So the law was changed so that a man who knowingly has sex with a trafficked person paying money is committing a crime. And there have been very few cases, but it certainly raised awareness. I think probably quite a few people in the House of Commons and the House of Lords thought, oops, my past might catch up with me here. And when you talk to people in the sex trades, you do hear some very famous names frequently mentioned. So we did that. And also on the porn front, this is in the days before internet, we got the retailers to shrink wrap lads mags and porn mags and put them on the top shelf, because previous to that, they were right down at buggy eye level, and little children in their buggies could see very, very sexualized portrayals of people. And we had a lot of fun doing that, because it was at the time when Tesco was saying you couldn't go in pajamas. So we targeted them, putting on our pajamas over our clothes and doing the conga around the shop singing, "Let's get rid of lads mags, let's get rid of lads mags." And everybody laughed. And it was one of these very good natured protests. That's obviously the point went home. So I am in favour of protest and activism being a lot of fun, and by and large, it can be.
Great. How would you describe surrogacy? Let's get into the topic, because some people don't know much about it.
Well, it's in one sentence, it's when one woman has a baby at the behest of somebody else. But therein lies a multitude of sins. It's a bit like saying, oh, a slave is a person who does things for somebody else, you know. It all sounds okay, doesn't it? We all need things doing for us. Everybody at some time will hanker for a baby, but you have to really unpack it before you find out, particularly in a sexist society like our own, where the inequalities are so huge, even in developed Western countries, that the way it can push women back down into horrible situations.
Right, I see. And it sounds quite biblical in a way.
It's in the Bible, but that's where the slavery comes in. I forget which patriarch it is, but it's one. He has it's Abraham, yes. He has a baby with Hagar, his concubine,
yes.
because being a patriarch, he had a load of concubines. He was had loads of women and slaves. She was a slave. She had no choice in the matter.
Yes, I see. And what problems have you identified with the process as a whole, even as it is with
there are so many. There are so many that most people will switch off and think, oh my God, I need a glass of wine before you even get halfway through. Just to start off, we found over 60 reasons. You have to start with the position that women are the world's only disadvantaged majority. And there are many minorities within that, many minorities, women are disadvantaged, but women as a whole are the only disadvantaged majority in the world. And as a result, they get persuaded, coerced into all sorts of things. It might be at a family level. Oh, my sister can't conceive, you know, can you have a baby for her? Which somebody told me the other day had happened to them. It might be economic pressures. You know, it's very hard being a mother. It's very hard being a single parent and trying to earn money for you to keep your kids while actually taking care of them at the same time. I mean, I've been through it, I know. Lack of opportunity. So many jobs are open to men, or men get all the well-paid roles. We're socialized into being altruistic and kind and valuing ourselves for doing things for other people rather than ourselves. And if you count the children that we're closely involved in caring with, we actually make up 63% of the world's population. So a majority is actually taking care of the needs of a minority. Many women who do surrogacy for extra cash may find that there is a problem with the baby they've carried for somebody else. It may have a disability or a health condition, and they may be told, sorry, that baby's not acceptable. You won't be getting paid. And by the way, you've got a mouth to feed. Or in some countries, if the woman can't manage another child, it will be put into an orphanage in awful conditions. And, you know, Ukraine is full of orphanages like that. We all saw the horrible pictures of the Romanian orphanages a few years ago. And they're countries where very, very poor women have got very, very few options to make some money. And naturally, they do think, well, this is something I can do to feed my existing children. Women can get pressured by husbands, particularly in more patriarchal societies. There was a horrible expose in India a few years ago about women basically kept in a hospital ward. They weren't allowed out. They were just fed on a schedule. They were like farm animals. You know, they didn't have their freedom of movement. And sadly, husbands do profit from wives doing surrogacy. However it's dressed up, that is what happens. And obviously it's very, very wrong. The rights of the child are completely ignored. No child could consent to being surrogated. I got corrected on this, actually. I said that no child knows what it wants at birth. And somebody said, no, every child knows what it wants at birth. It wants its mother's body and its mother's breast. That is all the child wants. That is the full extent of its needs. And you can't really argue with that. And this is the most basic start in life that's being taken away from children.
Yes.
So loads and loads and loads of things. That's about the first 7 or 8.
The Law Commission published its proposals in March. First of all, we've got the very quick question from Una. Why now? Why have they produced them now? And how effective was their consultation?
Una's absolutely right. The men are pimps. The consultation was appalling. It started out being originated by a pro-surrogacy group who ran a letter writing campaign. Now, let me ask you, how many letters from pro-surrogacy people do you think it should take before this leaps to the top of the list for law reform? 5,000? 10,000? Come on, put something in the chat.
30,000.
30,000. 343.
No.
Was the number of letters that generated this attention to making surrogacy legal. 343. Or a lot of the pro-surrogacy people, gay men's groups, trans rights groups, got all their family to write in saying how important surrogacy was. And on the basis of that, the Law Commission took it up. An APPG, an all-party parliamentary group, was started. In theory, only has 2 parties in it. Unfortunately, my MP is on it. And when we tried to get the minutes of some of the meetings, they were magically unavailable. Surrogacy UK provide the secretariat for that APPG.
No.
And the proceedings are not able to be accessed by the public. So right from the beginning, it should never have been on the list. It was orchestrated. It was corrupt. Having said that, You'd think they'd do a good consultation, wouldn't you? The Law Commission does this all the time. It's its bread and butter. Now, the Law Commission thinks that the proposals and the consultations it does should be fair, but it didn't consult women's groups. Now, you cannot do surrogacy without women's groups. We are the only people essential for surrogacy to happen. You would think that we would be top of the list, that they would be consulting hundreds of us. No, they mentioned a couple of groups that concern themselves with birth, but not the whole shebang. They should have done. It is not fair. It cannot be fair not to involve women. They said that things should be simple. Their consultation was so opaque that one woman said it took her 100 hours to do it. It was full of long legalistic stuff, missed all the key questions, which I'm happy to go through with you tonight, and we've started on. It was unnecessarily complicated to a very high degree. They're supposed to be open and genuine. It's not open and genuine only to consult the people that agree with you. It's like a tobacco company running a consultation and only consulting newsagents who make profit from selling fags. Their consultations are supposed to be cost effective. It didn't need to be that long and complicated. We ran our own consultation because we were so dissatisfied with them. And that's just me and one volunteer putting a thing together using free software. We consulted organisations representing nearly 20,000 women. If we can do it in our spare time, they could have done it too. It's supposed to be modern. Now, in this, we've had the vote for a long time, Law Commission. You can't be modern if you're not giving women a say. Modern means listen to women. And their consultation is supposed to be fit for purpose. It wasn't fit for purpose. It missed out the important questions. It missed out the important people. And as a result, it got ridiculous answers. So entirely at odds. It is corrupt. That's the only word you can use. It is corrupt. It is a travesty of a consultation. And it's not just us saying this. 90% of the women's organisations we surveyed agreed with us very, very strongly, as you can see if you read our report. So it's all a total mess. Perhaps partly accounted for by the fact that the head of the Law Commission at the time was a property lawyer. I'm pleased to say that he's now been replaced by a couple of senior women civil servants who, you know, if they'd been there at the time, probably would have done a better job. But everything's going ahead. The proposals based on this consultation are still going ahead, as Una's picked up. We've sent our report and this to all sorts of journalists. You know, we've complained to Surrogacy UK, we've complained to the Law Commission, zilch, no one replies to us. So we did our own report and off we went. And we found that this huge degree of consensus that there were masses of problems. People thought of problems that we hadn't even thought of, we had no idea about. And, you know, it is a worldwide trade. And there's a lot more to it. So where would you like me to go next?
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because one of the questions, another question from Una is, which birth groups did they consult with?
You'd have to have a look. I don't know them off the top of my head.
Okay.
But if you look at their consultation, it will say at the top, people concerned with the process of birth, which is, of course, far more dangerous in an artificially induced pregnancy.
Of course, yeah.
And in a pregnancy where you're not using the eggs from your own body.
Now, UK already legalised altruistic pregnancies some years ago, and that was
you forgot to do something there, Alison.
Yeah,
you forgot to do the altruistic bit.
But it was quite controversial just doing that.
Yeah.
So, what difference would commercialisation make to our setup in this country? Well,
it's horrendous already, because surrogacy is horrendous. Altruistic, another word for altruistic is poorly paid, given the costs to women's bodies. I think it's a bit much to diagnose what's going on in a woman's head. We know we're all socialized to be kind, nice, and altruistic. Personally, I put a lot of effort into struggling not to be too much like that for my own benefit and that of my family. But under the current regime, you can claim expenses. Now, the amount of expenses that you can claim is usually between £15,000 and £20,000. There's no very strict controls on it. But when you think about a woman in a low-paid job, that's as much as she will bring home in a year. So you can see why it might look like an advantageous thing. If you're at home looking after one child, you might think, well, I remember thinking this. I became a childminder. I've got to be home with one child. Why don't I do this at the same time?
Yes.
So Again, but then when you look at it, the mother of a young child, is it a good idea for her to undergo a dangerous medical procedure, which may put her life at risk and may result in her having to tell that one child, oh, by the way, your sibling went somewhere else. Your sibling's not going to grow up with you at some point in its life.
And how would you feel? If I was a child of that family and I knew that my mum was giving a child away,
yes,
I think that might be psychologically damaging to the other children.
Of course. You might think, well, maybe mum's going to give me away one day.
Something like that.
And also, what about grandmas, granddads, aunties, uncles, siblings, cousins? Who owns a child is a very important question here. And the only possible answer is the child owns the child.
Yes.
If you say one person owns another person, you are talking about slavery. I'm sorry. And this is why it came out of slavery, and it cannot be taken away from a context of slavery. Once you talk about owning a child and giving a child, especially when you talk about selling a child, which is what it is really, then you are back in slavery days. And that is why we should have a complete ban on here as elsewhere.
How does surrogacy compromise our commitment to, well, the UK Children Act for starters, and also the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about 9 different ways with the rights of the child. Would you like me to?
I think I would.
Rights of the child.
I would. Yes.
Okay. We haven't finished with the women yet, Right. Okay. First of all, surrogacy deliberately and knowingly puts children at risk, both physically, medically, and psychologically, solely for motives of profit and acquisition by those who can afford to pay. I'm sorry, it's wrong. Surrogated babies. Now, this is the best bit. This is the bit to savor. I hate to be cynical, but surrogated babies will be treated worse than puppies, because under Kennel Club rules in this country, a puppy from a breeding bitch must stay with its mother for 8 weeks to be breastfed, loved, socialized, and have a good start in the world. Yet a surrogated human baby can be taken away the next day and given to another person.
The next day?
Yes. But if it was 2 days, is it any better? If it was 3 days, is it any better? It's wrong. There's also the fact that, going back to the women, under Kennel Club rules, there is a very strict limit placed on the number of breeding litters that a breeding bitch can have. Whereas under the new surrogacy proposals, you can have a surrogacy baby every year for 20 years if you want. I mean, it'll ruin your body, but there is no limit. Again, very often a cesarean is needed because there are often multiple births. If you're a dog, I think it's only 2 or 3 cesareans in your lifetime that the Kennel Club allows. A human mother, no, as much as you like, no limit proposed. And I can see you're shocked, and I hope everybody else is too. There are so many shocking things here. Any one should be enough for us to say, no way. There are so many. Anyway.
So there's no limits at all?
No limit proposed.
Blimey.
Yes.
We'll have to marshal some opposition to that, shan't we?
Well, this is what we're trying to do. Back to the children.
Yes.
Contraventions of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, which the UK, of course, is signed up to. This says that the rights of the child must be prioritised, must come first. No way in surrogacy, the rights of the child are down the bottom of the list. It says that the child's view must be respected. It's clearly not in surrogacy. The child's view is completely discounted. It says the child must be given the protection and care necessary for its well-being. No, it's not, is it? We all know that the best thing for a child, unless there's medical problems with the mother, she can't breastfeed, she's too ill to hold the child, is that the child is next to that mother, breastfeeding regularly. So that's 3 so far, isn't it? The child, under the UNCRC, the child has the right to know and be cared for by its parents, unless this is not possible. That is being disregarded flagrantly. And the child is because the child is deliberately separated from its parents. So signatory states have a duty to protect children, yet bear in mind that many children get rejected after they've been born because there's a health condition, or they come out with the wrong skin color, or there's a disability. Or there have been cases where, quite recently, where one woman commissioned 2 surrogacy babies separately in separate, I think it was separate countries, separate surrogates. But the first one was okay, so she didn't want the second one. Yeah, I know.
So what happened?
Permitting surrogacy itself constitutes a failure to protect children. It's a child protection.
Let's go back to that woman who she contracted with 2 women to have babies. There's a contract there for, and she'd expect the mother.
These contracts, Alison, are not the kind of contracts between a buyer and seller of a house. They are contracts drawn up by surrogacy agencies, non-profits. Well, they're all having nice jobs and shareholdings, aren't they?
Yes.
And they are not equal contracts. The woman doesn't have an equal say. She gets to sign. Sometimes the woman might be illiterate and not understand what she's signing. Do you think they provide someone to tell her? Why would they? They're in business. These so-called non-profits are business.
And then on the other hand, they expect the mother who's giving birth to perform the contract in favour of the buyer.
Yes.
I was going to say buyer.
Yes, and I mean, this can have truly horrendous clauses. Very often they implant multiple eggs. And then if there's more than one pregnancy or 2 they will force that woman to have a fetus aborted. And imagine that. You know, you've got 3 babies growing inside you, and they say, "Oh, well, we're going to remove one. It's in the contract. You can't stop us." So this woman's got to undergo an abortion that she doesn't want.
So it's an unequal performance of contract. On the one hand,
of course. It's not a proper exchange, is it? It's one woman's body is being used, and the other people are buying something. But it's unequal by its very nature.
When the surrogate buyer wanted to have 2 pregnancies, she wasn't forced to complete the. It's just horrendous. It's just.
She may have had to pay something to the agency, but the point is that the woman won't get paid.
That's. I mean,
so
the whole idea.
Obviously, hang on, doesn't end there. Surrogated children have a higher risk of being preterm,
yes,
or of having low birth weight, which in turn may lead to later health issues. For example, it's been suggested that accelerated aging can result from that. Again, we haven't got studies, we haven't got findings, we haven't got research. We're rushing into this without checking it out,
without thinking properly.
Also, there's a higher risk of infant mortality. And again, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child says that states have a duty to work on child mortality to bring it down. By permitting surrogacy, we're creating conditions where it may well rise.
Blimey.
So, we may get more.
There's a comment here from Firat Cengiz. Rich white European men are exploiting the bodies of less advantaged women.
Absolutely. I've got some Ukrainians living with me, and I had a little chat with them about that. And they said, "Oh, yes, it's because we're white. Because we've got lots of poor women and we're very, very white."
Yes, I see.
Yeah, so, and you know, it's true. We're getting into the field of eugenics here, where people can specify the kind of baby they want. We actually sent some spies into the Modern Family show a couple of years ago, which is the big surrogacy event for people that are thinking of having fertility treatment or anything like that.
Yes.
And they were horrified. They were horrified. It was basically designer babies, you know, and also, oh, it's cheaper in Mexico. No, you don't have to pay that. You can get it cheaper here. It's basically just a supermarket for designer babies.
That is appalling, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing on the website that they wrote a report about it. They were sick and they said, we can't go there again. It's too awful.
There's a comment here that please be aware that same-sex marriage is leading to a new demand for babies, for male couples especially. There was even a couple of exhibitions at one of the big London centres before COVID. I think these are resumed in September.
Yes.
So will we be demonstrating?
That's outside? The one that'll be the one that we went to, the Modern Family show. Yeah, there is another one coming up in September. Yes.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean that it sounds worse and worse the more you go.
I don't think we can blame same-sex marriage. I think we need to. The point is that no one has a right to a child. And I know there's a lot of, as she says, same-sex marriage. There's a lot of gay male couples that want. And I know we've got some men here listening to the webinar. Nobody has a right to the child. Many women don't get a child they want. Councillor Gary Powell is a gay man who's done some very good work on this. And we did a webinar with him.
I heard him speak,
which is available on our YouTube channel. Unfortunately, nobody does. Many women have got health. My own daughter has got a type 1 diabetes, which is going to make it very, very risky for her to have children. She's
Yes.
probably not going to for that reason. It's very tough, but unfortunately, no one has a right to a child. We cannot package children and sell them. We cannot.
I'm gonna ask you now if there's a, and I think there is a connection with transgender ideology.
Oh God, yes, huge connection. Yes. The connection is that if you are a person who thinks you should be the opposite sex or are the opposite sex, and you have alterations done to your body in the form of taking hormones and having surgery, then you are reducing your fertility. That the hormone treatments hugely reduce your fertility, and if you persevere with it, will take your fertility away. And obviously, if you're a woman, you get your breast cut off, you ain't going to be able to breastfeed. So yes, if you've taken, and the few examples there've been where they say, oh, a man has had a baby, it's a woman who has, termed herself a man, taken hormones for a while, and then wanted to have a child. She's come off the hormones, and her body, fortunately for her, has righted itself enough for her to produce a baby. I'm not sure about the effects of the baby on taking all that testosterone, but there haven't been very many cases, and it has happened. But the point is that the big pharma profits hugely out of transgenderism, because they sell you the hormones on the way to change sex, and they sell you different hormones if you change your mind on the way back. And if you then decide that surrogacy is not for you, then you can't have a baby and you really want one, then you go down the surrogacy route. And all the drugs and so on, some of them are very, very expensive, all the treatments, all the therapy, all the counselling, will all add to the profits.
Yes.
And let's just remember what the doctors say in the Hippocratic Oath before they even start. First, do no harm. I don't see how any doctor can involve themselves in this without doing harm, knowingly doing harm.
Okay.
So, should we just have another look in the chat?
Yeah, I've just had a little look. Summer, I don't know whether you want to ask this, Summer, but we're still in exposition mode at the moment. Can you think of some clear, quick points that people can make? I think
Alison, I can't hear you, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, Summer's saying, can you suggest some clear, quick points that we can make? And I think we'll be touching on this later on with the letters you can write to your MPs, that sort of thing.
Some clear, quick points. There are so many. I'm about halfway through making them. I think the puppies are the one that you will remember.
Yeah.
Sadly. And the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child are the ones.
And our Children Act, our National Children Act, which the children's interests are
yes.
at the heart of the Children Act.
There are going to, when we come on to the effects on more wider effects on society, there are going to be legal cases here, because all this information is in the public domain. Our complaints are in the public domain. The Law Commission going ahead despite the corruption is in the public domain. There will be legal cases from unhappy children and also unhappy women. And there may even be legal cases from people who acquire children. Because we all know family life is not a picnic. It may be nice having your photo taken with a new baby. We've all been there. It's great. But, it can be an absolute nightmare. I did ask this question at Standing for Women in Hyde Park the other day. I said, out of the people here who have brought up children, could any of you at the age of 18 have foreseen the full implications of it? And not one woman put her hand up. And let's face it, girls of 18 can do this. Oh yeah, I'll be a surrogate. I'll have a baby for you. There's a very good BBC series called The Nest, where a young woman does exactly that. And in contrast with most media portrayals, it's very realistic and very, very, very well done and a very good watch. So I would recommend that, because it's more realistic.
Is that on iPlayer?
Yeah, I think so. It's on. Yes, a BBC one, so you find it on there. Yes,
Fantastic.
It's by Nicole Taylor.
Right.
So we've done the. Where do you want to go now?
Well, I'm going to ask you about the effects on the women who are, I'll say, the purchasers, the people who want to have children. How will this process affect their affect, towards the children they've acquired?
Well, you're asking how having had a child via surrogacy would affect their attitude to the child.
Yes, that's really what I'm trying to say.
We don't know. I mean, some people find it, who've had biological children, find it quite easy to walk away from them. This is why we have the Child Support Agency set up.
Of course.
you know, I've been through things with my children where I've said, that's it, you don't live here anymore, this is all too much, you know, obviously, you know, at an advanced age of childhood. But it's impossible to know. I do think one of the things that ties you to your child when times are tough is the fact that they look like you, they sound like you, they even make the same stupid mistakes as you make. And so even when they're being an absolute total moron, you still love them, because you can probably look back and think, oh God, that's like when I did this, you know, thank goodness my mother still loved me. And, you know, so without that genetic link, I think it's a lot harder. And I do have a personal example of a friend of mine who had 2 children. She had to have an egg donated. And as time went on, lovely boys, all fine. As time went on, she and her husband separated. And as often happens, there was a bit of a battle over the children. And the father of the children, who was it was his sperm that had created them, said, well, actually, boys, you've got nothing to do with your mother anyway. There's no biological link between you and your mother. You don't have to have her in your lives if you don't want to. You can keep out of her way. Now, obviously, she's devastated. She carried these babies, she brought them up, she did everything for them as a mother does. And now they've been kind of harvested by the father because he's their real dad. So, I mean, it's a tough case. There's no real answer to that, but we do know that it can go horribly wrong.
I see. Now, Bernadette has put in a link to Julie Bindle's interview of a surrogacy agency, and it sounds horrifying. So people will have that link. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some more links in as we go along.
Yeah, Julie Bindle will be sound on surrogacy, totally.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, there is this commission. Jackie Stoyle has made a good point. Yes, they're recommending that the buyer will have parental rights immediately the baby is born. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but it looks like we're moving towards a situation where the baby doesn't even have the name of its mother on the birth certificate. One good thing about the Law Commission's proposals, it's good except that I think it's unenforceable, is that they're now saying that children must be told. I'm not sure how you enforce that, because we know that very often children aren't told. Children are happier if they are told and have a chance to come to terms with the facts and, know who they are. But there is this horrible condition called genetic bewilderment where children are completely lost. We all seek after identity. Society has been very fragmented in the last 100 years or so with world wars and things. Everybody's looking for their roots, aren't they? And to deliberately not bring into the world a child who doesn't know is I think, cruel and could be damaging.
We've got another comment earlier on from Una Jane Whitfield. The only thing which protects UK surrogate mothers and the baby is the legal provision that the contract is voidable at the mother's behest. The surrogate mother can decide to keep the baby, which introduces some kind of lever in favour of the mother. Not much, of course.
Yeah, you may know more than I do there, Una. I don't know for sure.
Well, in any case, Una is volunteering to be one of your demonstrators at the next show.
Yeah, we did do a demonstration outside there. Yes, thank you, Una. I look forward to seeing you there. Yeah, and okay. Amber is right. Yes, the Modern Family Show is the big event that comes every year. A big, it's quite expensive. I mean, if you want to put yourself through it, do. If you want to go in, as a volunteer on our behalf, then we'll buy you tickets as long as you do us a report, which is what we did last time, because we need to make these things public, what they're doing. Obviously, then it's all they're doing it for money. This term non-profit is very much maligned. Surrogacy UK may be set up as a non-profit. Last time I looked, I think it had 70,000 in its bank account, according to its own accounts. But you don't know how many shares the people in Surrogacy UK have got in this. You don't know how many shares MPs on the APPG have got. Andrew Percy, who is one of the APPG MPs, sees himself as being part of the surrogacy community. There's no way he's taking an independent stance on all that. So yes, I mean, we do need a feminist fight back on this. So Jackie, you may know more about that than me do. Yeah, hidden camera. Yes, thank you, Amber.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Where were we? There's lots. We talked about the puppies and the cesareans. There's a few things we haven't got.
How is it going to affect the NHS?
Now,
how's it going to affect
egg donation?
Oh, yeah, go on.
Egg donation sounds easy, doesn't it? Well, they put to have a procedure for collecting your eggs. it's actually quite dangerous. You can develop something called OHSS, ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. It means they've stimulated your ovaries too much. And several people have actually died from this. They haven't done when we wrote our report, but they have now. One of them died at King's College Hospital in London. I just Googled it earlier this evening. There's one in America, one in India, and one in King's College Hospital here in London. So, and young women are being bombarded by ads for this. We did a webinar with Olivia Palmer, and I've talked to various other young women. They say that the ads come up all the time. One of the young women that went into the Modern Family show was she had donated her eggs. She said it was worse than she thought, but also she discovered that it had given her an increased risk of cancer, and she hadn't been informed about that. And she already had a raised risk of cancer because of family, things in her family. And she had actually made that worse, more riskier by doing it.
Okay.
So don't think that the information is out there and given to you. You will have to seek it out.
So these young women who are donating these eggs, then it's not informed consent that they're agreeing to. They're not given the information that they can judge whether.
Well, they'll be given some information, but there's basically they can't be given full information because the research hasn't been done.
Yes.
Even if it had, I'm not sure. I think these they are making money out of people. They might not be giving the surrogate very much money, but they're sure taking an awful lot of money out of from the parents. Yes. And all the tests they pay for. Tests to see if your child is going to have this or have that. The agencies are making a bomb out of this.
And presumably they're employing people to do the tests.
Yes. And
doctors and clinicians to take part in the procedures.
Yes. But if it's all okay and the government authorises, then they can, a bit like all the doctors at the Tavistock. I'm sure you, like me, have read Hannah Barnes's book, and they recruited very young staff who were not very experienced, and they basically had to conform to the ideology. Otherwise, they would upset the director and she might cry. It's very easy to manipulate, particularly young people at early stages of their career. And if you say that big fertility is all fine from the top, people will find ways not to question what they're doing. We know that from all the transgender scandal.
Yes, and from history, people don't ask questions. What do they say? It's important to note that people don't ask questions if their livelihood depends upon not asking questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what I was going to ask you was about the position of the NHS. How will NHS and social services be impacted by the...
Well, hugely. I mean, you would assume, particularly NHS maternity services to start with. We know that there have been very well substantiated claims of racism. People with black skins aren't getting pain relief at the same rate as people with white skins. If you're a black woman having a baby, you are much more likely to lose that baby because a decent level of care is not given to you. They're hugely overstretched anyway. There was that awful case of that woman killing babies. Yes. There's the news today about people horrendously, loads of people getting raped in hospitals, all over the front pages of the Daily Mail, the Women's Rights Network campaign. Yes. So that's when it's not like we're starting from a hunky-dory, everything's fine. We're not. It's a mess. It's horrendous. That's without talking about the strikes, and that's without talking about a possible further pandemic. So there's all these horrendous things happening in NHS maternity services. But what will happen if there's a private clinic where a woman has issues which cannot be dealt with in that private clinic, which will have a relatively limited amount of drugs and equipment and so on, then the consultant who's got an NHS practice will find a way to get that person inserted into the NHS clinic, because they will be a priority. Their health is at risk, their life may be at risk. That person will jump to the top of the queue above all the other women and will get first-class treatment, and hopefully, I hope her life will be saved. The consultant will still be charging private rates back at base, and everybody else would have jumped down the queue, again, which may affect them negatively. So that's horrendous. But that is, I mean, I've known quite a few managers in the NHS that say that is what happens, not just in that, but in every area of medicine. So there's that. There's a huge drain on maternity services. If there's a problem with that child, if the child is born with any kind of defect or health condition, obviously they'll go straight to an NHS hospital to get it sorted out and looked after, and all the other children will fall further down the queue. So the impact on NHS is huge. Impact on social services will be huge, because one of the sad effects of making surrogacy easier is that children who are waiting for parents to adopt them are much less likely to be adopted. Parents tend to prefer their own child if they can. And there's this cult of babies, isn't there? And so children waiting for adoption are less likely to be adopted. And that in turn puts a bigger burden on social services who have to arrange care for them. And we all know that the very, very difficult lives they have. You know, children come out of care having been through the most awful things. They're more likely to be sucked into county lines, into prostitution, into all sorts of bad things. So there is a big cost to social services as well. And it's ongoing.
And the
and don't forget the rejected babies will also have to be taken care of by social services.
That's right. And the potentially adopted children who won't be adopted, they will be getting older and less likely again
exactly
to be adopted.
Exactly. Every year that goes by, they're getting older and less likely to be adopted. So yes, it's a multi-cause thing, and it's everywhere. It's pretty dark.
And when we had the pandemic and COVID and the Ukrainian war as well, that's another conflict. When we had the COVID pandemic and the Ukrainian war, both of these problems have had effects on the children involved and the mothers involved in surrogacy. Obviously, people couldn't travel to pick up their newly acquired children. Yeah, I'm sorry, that sounds awful.
Some of them had divorces, and so they changed their minds. Don't forget that. Sometimes people split up and say, "Oh no, well, can't have a baby now. I'm no longer married."
Oh my word! Yeah, all these problems that you can foresee, we can foresee just sitting in our homes. Yeah, and that without even having specialised, as you say, any research into what the likelihood is of these things happening. I know that there's not that many countries in the world that even permit surrogacy to take place.
That's right, and some of them stopped after they saw how exploitative it was.
So we're one of about 20, 30 countries that allow this. I like to compare our country or what happens here with what happens on the mainland of Europe, because there are close, comparators in terms of culture and size. And are the European countries that allow surrogacy or not?
It's big in the United States because obviously they have private medicine there and they don't have anything else. It's big in the Ukraine. I'm not an expert on geography. That's the only exam I ever failed. But I know it's banned in France, Spain, and Germany, which are closely very similar countries to our own. And where it is allowed, there seems to be a lot of abuses that go with it.
Right, I see. So another question is, how does the media treatment? I mean, it's all very, glamorous and glitzy when you see famous people having new babies that they've acquired from surrogacy agencies. But how does that affect the way that the public perceive the whole issue?
Well, the public really rely on the media to tell them because nobody else tells them. And very often the images are sanitized, glamorized, and completely unrealistic. Cute little baby feet, happy, smiling families. I wouldn't wish them ill, and nobody would. But the fact is that if you look at the facts behind it, that is very unrealistic. There are so many things that can go wrong, and even children's books have an unrealistic picture of surrogacy. When you read about surrogacy in books for little children, they always use an animal family to give it distance. It's some small furry animal. The doctor is a wise older man with glasses and a white coat, but again, playing into stereotypes. And again, nothing negative ever comes up. No risks ever mentioned. There's mummy's having another baby for somebody else and it's all hunky-dory and fine. So, yes, I mean, every portrayal of surrogacy, pretty much. I mean, to be fair, since the government proposals came out, there have been some critical articles. Sonia Soda has been critical. James Kirkup has been critical. But nobody has actually pulled it all together and said, look, there's a very, very good case for saying no to this. There really is. Because I think what's going to happen is we will learn the hard way. If these government proposals go through, in 20, 30, 40 years, it will be added to the list of scandals, the vaginal mesh, the replacement joints that weren't very good, all the awful things that nobody looked into properly before rushing in. And what we would like to try and do is to say, well, maybe we could bring it down. Maybe we could sort it out in 5 years and avoid the worst of the errors.
We've got a question from Lynn Sheridan. Lynn, because we're still in sort of full flow, I'm going to ask it for you. I'm not clear, she says, is a fertilized egg implanted in the surrogate so she isn't genetically related to the baby she gives birth to?
There's all sorts of things that you can implant. You can implant your own egg in a surrogate. So you are the biological mother of that child, but you don't carry it and you don't birth it. Sometimes, and you may get sperm donor, or you may have a partner. I mean, all sorts of combinations are possible.
Right down to the Handmaid's Tale type.
Yeah, which is why it's a fertility, and it can't just, there's not just one form, and there are problems with all of them.
Yes, I see.
And the same-sex male couple can buy an egg, from an egg donor. So they're kept and they're frozen and they're acquired. We had an interesting case the other day, didn't we, where a woman used a surrogate to produce a baby from her dead son's sperm, because it was his dying restitution of the child, and so she's both mother and grandmother to that child. Right,
and that was in Spain, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's going to be one confused child.
Yes, that's similar in a way to what happened in the olden days when a woman having pregnancy outside of marriage was frowned on, and often the child of that marriage, that pregnancy, was brought up by the grandmama.
Yes,
as the youngest of her children.
Yes.
So that was a confusing thing, certainly for people involved in those families.
That's always happened. It doesn't involve somebody else having the baby for you.
No, it doesn't. That's right.
But it doesn't involve taking a baby. Well, to be quite honest, some of those were very, very tragic cases. Do you remember when Claire Short revealed that she had been, she'd grown up in a Catholic community and she'd had a son out of wedlock who'd been brought up, and the heartbreak that I know I've met a lot of women. I'm not going to say that's okay, because it wasn't. A lot of mothers were denied the chance to bring up their own children without that being good for anybody.
Yes,
but it's not the same as surrogacy.
No.
Would you like me to tell you about the Japanese man?
Tell us about. I'm beginning to feel apprehensive already. Tell us about.
You should, because it doesn't get any better. There was a Japanese guy who commissioned 16 children via a number of different surrogates because he wanted a large family. He didn't actually, obviously he was a busy man, he didn't have time to take care of them personally, so he paid for childcare and had nannies for all of them.
No.
Now, to me, that is not being a parent, and that is not being part of a family. Sometimes these cases reveal the essence of it, don't they? It's a want, it's not a need. There is a difference.
Indeed. And
I don't know what's happening to those children now.
It's like a science fiction story. Did I read that there are some Chinese families whose children are being born and brought up in Japan?
Yes,
in
that's
case
right.
They need.
Yes, I came across that in the work of Oliver Bullough, who writes lots of not feminist stuff at all, but yes, 86 children in Japan are being brought up. They were brought into being by Chinese fathers with a Japanese surrogate, because if you have a child and they're being raised in Japan in childcare centres, and the father pops over weekly to visit, because that gives him residency rights in Japan should the regime all fall apart, and some of these big empires, that it's not a good place to be if you've fallen out with the regime. So they're hedging their bets. And also this may not apply in UK, but there are other countries where if you have a child there, you can get citizenship. And it's often very handy to conceal your assets and things like that, and control your tax obligations by hiding your assets, which again is another way of instrumentalizing children, isn't it? I mean, imagine being this poor child and daddy comes every week, which may be the same as all the other children in your childcare centre. But then you find out that that was done to you because daddy needed to make an exit. How would you feel? Must be awful.
I can imagine. The way Kazuo Ishiguro wrote a book about children being brought up to supply organs for richer people. I can imagine a novel of that sort of take.
It's like being in a novel.
Yeah, but these children are born and brought up not knowing, or perhaps gradually coming to know this, and being seriously psychologically damaged by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
then there was the
nobody's
Australian
doing any-
paedophile who commissioned a
What?
baby.
What?
There's no checks.
What?
How can you check an international? You cannot regulate an international market. It's paying. Oh, I've gone.
Oh, there,
What happened there?
Don't know, but you're back.
Okay, I'm back.
You're back in the room.
You cannot regulate an international market, and the world is an international market. The Modern Family show demonstrated that. You know, Mexico seemed to be quite a good option at the moment, the cheapest place and so on, and the baby will be a nice brown. You can't regulate, and there was an Australian paedophile. He was convicted paedophile. I'm not just making it up. He was convicted. There was no way anyone could stop him, because you can go to another country. There will be lots of this going on.
No, I'm saying surely, but all of my assumptions are being challenged here. I would have thought that social services would make a beeline for that case. And
how are they going to find out?
Well, how did you find out?
It's in the press.
So if it's in the press, the social services would know that.
It was in Australia.
Yeah, okay. I mean, they must have children's
It
services.
came out later. I don't know how they found out. Maybe somebody at the surrogacy agency did some research later. They might not have known at the time. But the fact is, it can happen. Look at all the offences people get away with. Look, that 17-year-old rapist got off the other day. All these people rape. There's a lot of very nasty people out there that aren't getting apprehended by the law, as well as the ones that are.
So let's get back to the basics now. The students who are persuaded that they can help pay off their student loans by going through
that's right.
Egg donation, they're going to be victimised. The poor women here and around the world who are going to be carrying somebody else's ovum or fertilised egg that has no genetic relationship to them. I'm wondering whether that would compromise their own health with, you know, the gamete joining together, not being your own. Wouldn't that have an impact on your health?
Well, I do say that that's the reason why so many women having their first pregnancy have so much sickness, isn't it? That the body is not recognising a foreign body because it's come from a man and is trying to reject it. So I don't know the answer to that. Again, I don't imagine a huge amount of studies have been done, because nobody wants to know the answer, as you so rightly said yourself. Nobody wants to know the answer to that question. But there are the dangers. Every pregnancy is risky. If you're having anything different about your pregnancy, it only increases the risks. Bearing in mind, and the older you get, I've been called an elderly prima gravida when I have my kids. The older you get, the riskier it can get, you know.
Of course.
But women who need the money will be doing this at quite an advanced stage, because there's no upper age limit. There's no limit on the number of times you can do it. There's no limit on the number of cesareans. If women are being coerced, which they will be, and exploited, which they will be, and forced, which they will be, some of them, then they're going to be horrendous health consequences for women. And of course, possibly for the baby that they're carrying. And it impacts on the existing families they got, and their ability to carry out care for their existing children. And maybe the elders in their family. Which we all know, women are generally the care. I'm sorry, Alison, I can see I'm upsetting you. It is very, very upsetting.
No. It's just one damn thing after another, and it doesn't get any better, does it?
No.
We've got some really good questions in the chat here. I'm going to ask Elle Brown if you'd like to ask your question about MPs. I'm
struggling to hear you again. Let me just see. 13 new messages, righto.
Elle Brown has got a question. Would you like to ask it, Elle Brown? Let's see.
Hang on, Elle Brown. Are there any MPs who feel that surrogacy is wrong? Not that I'm aware, no. The APPG. Well, I imagine there are, otherwise the APPG would have people from all parties on it. But yeah, I think it's one of these ones, a bit like the trans issue, where they all had to keep quiet for a very long time. You know, it was interesting when we sent our survey out to women's organisations. A lot of them wouldn't respond. The Fawcett Society represents women. You think that would be, yes, we'll have a view on surrogacy, we'll look into it, we'll have an informed view, and we'll take a position. Nope, we contacted them twice. I rang them personally. Please, could someone take a look at this? Please, could you fill in our survey? They absolutely wouldn't. Women's Aid wouldn't. We contacted a number of religious organisations and ethnic minority organisations because we wanted to have a good range. No.
Yes.
We still got
Oh,
organisations representing nearly 20,000 women because, you know, some of them did come back up. And we contacted individuals who publish on it as well. But yeah, there is Lewis Mooney in the House of Lords, who's I think against
excellent.
it. About, I think he's of precarious health.
He's a GP. Well, was a GP at one time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Before he was an MP.
Yeah.
He was a GP.
All this stuff about agencies, you're absolutely right, and it is all dystopian. It is all hellish, and it is all awful, and it is all commercializing babies' bodies. We forgot to say that one of the UN representatives said that where surrogacy pays more than basic expenses, it constitutes trafficking in children. That's what the UN representative
the
for
special
children
rapporteur,
said.
wasn't it?
Yes, that's right, the special rapporteur.
Yeah, was that?
And this is horrendous what Lisa's just put in there. Unreported world last year, they talked to an agency owner who said they've had requests for 100 or 1,000 babies to work their business. So these women will, these babies will be put to work, and they will be sold.
So no, stop. Wait, I'm asking a question from one commissioner. That is to say, a customer. Is that right? Not the law commission. We're talking about a customer.
Yes.
Commissioner. When asked why
basically,
she said
you can buy
to work
babies
in their business. So they're growing their children almost like the condition of slavery.
Where's the almost? Where is the almost? Those children will have to work to eat. There is no almost.
Yeah. Okay, that's a really troubling thing. I think we need to have an absolute campaign, and there are campaigns that we can undertake, aren't there? Now, I know that you've been working with Nordic Model Now and another group.
Stop Surrogacy Now, very, very good. And also there's the Centre for Bioethics and Culture, which I think is based in Canada.
Yes.
They came to speak at our Sorrow-Critical conference that we held.
Indeed. I think we probably need another one this year to really capitalise on this, because I'm not the only person who's totally ignorant about this until I started reading your documents and website. The more I read, the more horrendous it sounds.
Every time I look at it, it gets worse. I was never really interested in surrogacy, but the more you look, the worse it gets.
So we need to be talking to our MPs. We need to be talking to our prospective parliamentary candidates, because this is going to be on there.
It is better to write personalised letters. A way you can do it is just to maybe have a look on our site where there's lots of lists of things wrong with surrogacy. Pick out the ones that matter to you most, because it won't necessarily be the same ones. You know, I keep banging on about the puppies because they're the most memorable one, and everyone cares about puppies. But pick out, if you just pick out 2 or 3 that matter to you, it'll be a different 2 or 3 than those that somebody else picks out. And that will mean that your letter doesn't look the same as everyone else's.
Yeah, a young woman.
But do please get, do
donate. Donation.
And we're thinking of having an activist group in London to go. I mean, I did go and stand outside a surrogacy clinic one night and give out some leaflets, and they were very sweet and invited me in for a cup of tea, and we're a bit surprised that I didn't go away when I was told. I just wanted to see what reaction I got. It was an information evening for couples who were looking at it, and they were very dismissive. But I do feel that a lot of them are not being told the full story, and they don't know they're not being told the full story. They don't realise how much they're being profited out of, and probably a lot of them are in a very genuine emotional state about, I had to go through that thing about I might not be able to have children. Unfortunately, I did, but many of us would have thought, oh, how am I going to cope? How am I going to feel if it doesn't happen for me? We do sympathise, of course, but it doesn't make it right.
As we said before, young people whose fertility has been compromised utterly, they're going to be in the direst need. I can see that that's a huge problem that's coming up.
It is.
And I know that Anna in Nordic Model Now, she's asked us to write to MPs to ask them to reject the Law Commissioner's proposals. That there's a tool that you can use to send a template letter, but I would suggest that if you want to go to https://nm that's for Nordic Model Now.org, have a look at the template letter, but always make it your own, as you were saying before. Take the template, but also add in your own perspective and your own experience to give a more individual flavour to your letter. And also on Nordic Model Now's website, there's an article, ask your MP to say no to commercial style surrogacy in the UK. And there's a general article on their website. Most respondents to the Law Commission's surrogacy consultation want a total ban on surrogacy in the UK. So that's something that's, if people are saying they don't want it to happen, we need to put that on the agenda for the next general election, of course, as well. Because I'm sure this won't go through the whole process without a lot of discussions. Okay, let's see what other questions we've got here. Lisa Morrow. Lisa, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, sex selection. We didn't mention sex selection, of course.
Oh yeah, it was only I just listened to that podcast with Julie Bindel the other day, where she goes and speaks to some brokers in New York, and I don't know how she's done it, because it's amazing, because they speak completely candidly. They can't have realised who she is, and the things that they come out with are absolutely, you just can't believe what they're saying. So I just would encourage, definitely listen to that, and I think everyone would be really shocked by what their motives are. They're like, if people want to pay, we'll do these things, all sorts of really mad things they're prepared to do.
Oh wow.
Jane, would you like to ask your next point or question?
I've just seen it.
Yeah, for the other listeners.
Sorry, I was just because I campaign mainly on trans issues, because I'm gender critical. It's been known for a long time that there's a Reddit thread. It's a subreddit called Detransitioners. These are young people who've realized that they've made a huge mistake. Well, the number is amazingly high. All over the world, 46,200. That number has gone steadily up over the last 10 years. And so some of these will have had their fertility impaired, and at some point when they want to start families, it's all going to be really difficult for them, and surrogacy will be an option offered to them, no doubt.
Yeah. I'm trying to find, while we're speaking, I'm trying to find our questions and points. So I'm just going to ask, just one moment.
There's a few things we haven't talked about.
Go on.
One is the some of the other issues for women. Yes, the fact that egg donation may increase the risk of other health conditions. Again, there's no studies, there's no evidence. And when you've got purchasers involved in the prenatal care of a woman who's having a baby for them, she can't make her own independent decisions about what's best for her. And the healthcare professionals helping her will have conflicted values. Who do they go with? What's best for the woman or what's best for the people buying the baby? It's a mess for health staff.
I would have thought that the health staff, their first concern would be for the patient in their clinic.
Yes, but imagine if they're working in a maternity unit, they've also got they've got to balance it, haven't they, with the welfare of the baby too?
Yes.
It's not easy.
The baby and the mother rather than the buyers.
Yeah. And some of a forced abortion, or even if it's only a selective abortion, might traumatize a woman for life. It must be horrendous to be carrying a child, especially when you've had one out of your own body, and be forced to destroy it. It's horrendous.
Yes,
it's not to be done lightly, is it?
It's not an easy thing to talk about, is it?
No.
Indeed.
There is a requirement to have information sessions for people going to undertake surrogacy for somebody else, but there isn't very much information to tell them. And again, unless these are independently run, that people are going to be told the facts that the agency or clinic wants them to hear. But they can't. They can't cite what research has shown because there isn't any research. So they're of limited usefulness. I think a woman that hasn't had children as well can't appreciate. It's only when you've had one that you actually appreciate what's involved. Everyone, 100% of women I've ever asked about this says, no, had no idea what it was like.
I think this is often the case, and that's why they talk about women being radicalized by Mumsnet. That it's only
absolutely.
after they're taking maternity leave that they begin to see that all the sexism and objectification that's involved in being a woman.
That's right. There's also the fact that we were all taught about attachment theory about the importance of attaching to your child and bonding with dad and all that stuff. All goes completely out of the window when it comes to surrogacy. Attachment theory, we forget that now. We teach it in all the schools, all the syllabuses, all the therapists learn it, all the counsellors learn it. But we don't need it for surrogacy. Forget it. We don't need it. Attachment isn't possible because we're going to take that child away from the person it's supposed to attach to and put it somewhere else. That's a bit odd, isn't it?
It's very odd.
So there's that. You need to dissociate. There's a very close link between surrogacy and prostitution. And Kajsa Ekis-Ekman, who spoke at our conference, has done a lot of work on this. She says, the prostitute says, it's not my body while I'm having sexual contact with a man I don't wish to. And the prostitute says, it's not my baby. You have to dissociate. And and a lot of children who go through traumatic childhoods cope with it by dissociation. And they're more likely to be sucked into surrogacy because they're used to dissociating. And it's harmful, and it may lead them into other things, into other work where they need to dissociate. And that is not going to help them to recover psychologically and live a psychologically healthy life. So the dissociation involved is there. And again, with prostitution, people say it's the oldest profession, it's fine. Just like, we've gone back to biblical examples. It's not the oldest profession. Midwifery is the oldest profession. And would you like to guess what date that quotation comes from? Do you think it goes back a long way? No, it dates from the 19th century. It's Kipling. And Kipling is also the man who said, well, a woman is only a woman, but a good cigar is a smoke. So I think we don't need to be guided too much by Kipling here.
Yeah.
So dissociation is a problem. Bear in mind, certain women are also particularly vulnerable through poverty. They may have come from difficult families. They may have come from care. They may have literacy difficulties. They may have mental health problems. They may have learning difficulties. They may be English second language. They may be migrant women. All these women who are more vulnerable are going to be more likely to get sucked into surrogacy because of their vulnerabilities. And they may not understand exactly what they're signing up to. And there's a lot of them.
I think you've got a point that you want to make. So over to you, I think.
I hope I explain this properly. But my friend was telling me about how the DNA works, and she said that when you implant the egg, so that information is there from the person who has donated the egg, but it's actually the mother's body. When it goes into the mother's body, it's the mother's body who is carrying the child, which will turn on various parts of the DNA. So although it's you would say that is the biological child of the donor of the egg, it's actually still very much of the mother who carried it. So I just thought that was a really interesting thing that takes away really from the idea that it is as simple as you're just looking after the baby for somebody, like putting it childcare, some sort of strange childcare. Thank you.
I'm putting some links in the chat. I think what we'll have to do is maybe add them to our website at the end, because I don't know whether I'll be able to get them all in. Let's see if there's somebody else got a comment. Amber. And Catherine Russell says epigenetics. Do you want to talk about epigenetics, Catherine? Question mark.
Oh, just a question arising from what Lisa's saying. It's not something I know a lot about. I think when you and I were at school, Alison, we were told that there is junk DNA in people's chromosomes which doesn't do anything. In fact, people understand now that that DNA does have quite a an important role. So what Lisa was saying sounded a lot like sort of epigenetics. It's that's quite an amazing point. The mother's body sort of actually having a genetic influence on the child, even though the egg came from somebody else.
Yeah. So all those things are complications that we really don't need, do we? There's a few more links going in. I'm trying to balance this.
Can we pick up on the epigenetics?
Go on.
Yeah, because Amber said to everybody, epigenetics are really important, as are the health conditions that that may go down the generations. Epigenetics is about the effects of certain events like a famine or a disaster, which get encoded in your DNA and can actually go down the generations. For example, they found that in our grandmother's generations, people who went through famine may deal with food in different ways. Their bodies may process food in different ways because a couple of generations back, somebody went through a huge scarcity. And it's really important that children have this information. Also health conditions, I've got a daughter with, as I said, with type 1 diabetes. We've searched high and low in the family. We can't find out anybody else that's got it. But very often there is a link. And if you know what that link is, you're more likely to be on the uptake. I mean, my daughter could have died when she got diagnosed because we had no idea what it was. If it hadn't been for one very on the board GP, she would no longer be with us. So it's really important that children have this information. And even though the one good thing that's in these proposals is that children must be told that they are children of surrogacy and so on, it's a difficult conversation. And a lot of parents are not very skilled at difficult conversations. It's a hard one to have. There's no guarantee that they will be told, and there's no guarantee that they will have the information they need to ensure that their health remains as best it can.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the book, Ekman, Being Bought.
Yes. And was she one of the speakers at the
yeah, she spoke at our
webinar.
conference. Yes. The other thing we have to bear in mind is that economic needs of women. We're already disadvantaged in our career. Men already get paid more than us for doing the same job. A woman who goes down the surrogacy route is, while she's doing that, she's not developing her career or her working life. She's not developing any payable skills. And after, however many surrogacies she wants to do, if she's very lucky and nothing bad happens to her in any way, she may think, well, now I want to have a bit of a career. And she's fallen behind. She's slipped down the ladder. Many more people will have had more experience than her. So it's kind of a diversion for women in a way.
It's a cul-de-sac, in fact, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. It is. And it's exploiting our reproductive facilities for the benefit of somebody else. Oh, Bessel van der Kolk. Well, we like him. He's the big trauma expert. And, a lot of women who go through surrogacy are going to be traumatized for life, especially if it goes wrong. But even so, the fact that they, I'm sure we can all think, what if I'd given up one of my children?
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, there's something, it might simplify it for people who don't understand epigenetics. Rachel Yehuda did research. I don't know if you're aware of her. She did research, and I learned this in Bessel's training course. They did a year's training course on trauma. And they basically looked at generations from the Holocaust. And they also looked at generations from the Dutch famine. Yeah, and also right. 9/11, pregnant mothers who had never even seen their children. They found out that the children, even if they hadn't been seen or they were third, fourth generation down, held exactly the same stress levels. It's not called cortisol, it's something else, specific stress level. They actually held exactly the same. And it is like the Dutch famine. They found that the children had these, the food issues. Yeah. And the mothers actually, even though they went through famine, their bodies changed in order to support the child, for them to survive, and that followed through. So it is very, very huge, extremely huge. And I'm also, trying to get hold of CAFCAS on this issue, that children must know, if they're adopted, etc. These health issues are not known either on that side of it.
Yeah. Thank you. You explained it much better.
I just thought it'd be simpler because it was complex for me. It took me a couple of months to get my head around. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. That's really interesting. And the likelihood of these same effects happening in, I'm sorry, the light is just coming through. It's behind your head, but yeah, that's better. The likelihood of children and mothers being affected badly by these activities is just horrific, isn't it? In fact, everything I've heard this evening is piling Pelion upon Ossa, isn't it? That
Absolutely.
everything is another negative effect. I can't think. I wonder if anybody listening to this evening can think of a positive aspect at all of this. I'm finding it very difficult to think of anything positive. Janice, can you think of any positive possibilities?
Well, it's always nice to get what you want, isn't it? I think surrogacy is a baby is a want, what, a need. You know, I don't need chocolate, but I want it and I do eat it and I enjoy it. It's always nice to get what you want, even if it's a 20-year sentence. And being a parent is a 20-year sentence. You've got to be there for 20 years, haven't you, really, to give this person a start in life. I think people don't realise what they're taking on.
And I suppose for a very, very poor woman, maybe not educated in any real way, it would be riches beyond the dreams of avarice for her. But if she survives it all.
The other thing is, there's a lot of women in places like Ukraine, because there's a social stigma attached and they're still very family-based societies. Very often a mother, maybe she's a widow or her relationship's broken down, there's a stigma attached to that. She will move to another city to do surrogacy. So she's away from her own support networks. She's maybe got a couple of young children to support. This is why she's doing it, to get the money to feed them. So in order to engage in it, she's had to move away from the people who would have helped her. And she's on her own if anything goes wrong with the pregnancy. Okay, if she gets the money, I guess maybe she could have a better life for her children. But if it goes wrong, who's she going to call? You know, she's got nobody there. And that can have an effect on the children as well, you know.
So that's the same sort of deracination that we saw in the Industrial Revolution, when girls and boys were leaving their villages to go and work in the factories in the cities, and they lost all contact, most contact.
And that's why a lot of us aren't in touch with our ancestors anymore. That's why I'm not in touch with mine, because they all went to work in mills. Yeah.
Lisa, you've got another comment. Lisa?
Yeah.
What is it?
Oh, I was only saying how you were saying about a positive thing, and I find that everybody I talk to, even people that are really sort of right on, when I do kind of go in with the, you know, crazy stuff when I'm talking to people, but they're always absolutely shocked, and the sort of people that they don't know that they're not meant to be horrified yet, perhaps. You know, they don't know that this isn't the sort of woke position, but I do find that people, you know, really are shocked. So at least it's something we can talk to people about without being demonized, perhaps, at the moment.
Thank you. I think our host, Liberal Voice for Women, has got a hand up. Thank you, somebody, for alerting me to that.
Thank you.
What have you got to say to us?
That I attempted to, I told somebody I was coming to this event and got into a conversation with surrogacy and tried to explain why I was against it. And all of the arguments they dismissed as, well, you know, what business is it of yours? This sort of culture of the personal and personal fulfillment, and how awful it is not to be able to have children if that's your dream. So on the one hand, what was important to them was the unhappiness of an infertile person, and also this feeling that it's not our business what other people are doing. And then when I said, well, there's exploitation, and they said, well, they're adults, they're making a decision, they're choosing it, they're getting something out of it. And this person, no surprise it was a man, was incredibly resistant to the idea that it was immoral or unethical, or that there were harms, or that there was something bigger that matters, rather than somebody getting their gratification.
Yeah. So it's a question of public policy, isn't it? So
I'm afraid I couldn't hear.
Seem to be,
it's a matter of public.
prioritising.
It's a matter of public policy, as much as individual desires. And is there something you've outlined all the harms to the NHS, the social services, to the children, the mothers, and the unadopted children? Is it a matter of public policy that we shouldn't actually foster? I'm using that in a deliberate way. We shouldn't foster the enthusiasm for surrogacy when we already have a number of children unadopted that need homes, and even more, if climate change, when climate change is a big issue already, do we actually want to be producing more upon more and upon more children for the burdened world to care for?
Yeah, I think there's a lack of political will to do those socially collective, socially beneficial decisions, if it means standing in the way of a powerful or charismatic person, and we've got this emotion-led politics. I don't know how we get back to the kind of politics that puts society first.
Well, the Liberal Democrats are supposed to have an evidence-based approach to policy making. So, if there isn't evidence of harm, then we need to be asking for research to be undertaken to prove one way or another whether it is harmful or not, so that you can have a decent policy making profile. Wouldn't you say?
You asking me?
I'm asking you.
I didn't hear all that, Alison.
Oh, sorry. I'm saying we're supposed to be evidence-based policymakers in the Liberal
Evidence-based, the thing
Democrats.
is, they do need, that's the one thing they need to do, is collect some evidence. If you're going to move forward with this, it should be done in strictly controlled studies on small numbers until you have enough evidence to say, how safe is it for to collect eggs? How many eggs is the best amount to collect for the woman's safety? It would take a lot longer. I'm not saying that you should never, ever, ever allow surrogacy, although if I had to make, a choice, I would. But the main problem is that they're not collecting any evidence, and we need proper studies, done in proper hospitals, neutral design, done by academics without a bias. And that's almost impossible to do, because there's so much big pharma money washing around in academia, just as there's so much pro-prostitution money washing around, that you can do a PhD on fetishes and get it, and you could probably do a PhD on what's the favorite name of a surrogated child and get money for it. So I do sort of despair about the independence of the academic sector, but that's what must, that's really what we have to do.
Terry has got a question. Terry, will you ask your question, please? Terry?
I can see Terry's question.
Okay, fire away.
Again, there's all sorts of different combinations of getting around the sperm not working and eggs not working. So all combinations are included in the fertility industry. So a friend of yours couldn't have children, but her partner's sperm was okay, and they now have twins. So possibilities are they could have got a donor from somebody else, and that woman could have carried it if the egg was the problem, or they could have, if his partner's egg was an issue, then they would have used somebody else's egg. They could have maybe taken one of her eggs and put it in another woman. We don't know. But the donor would have been paid. A normal amount in this country would be £750 for egg donation. Apparently, it's a lot more painful and uncomfortable than they give out. And again, there can be long-term harms.
I see.
So.
No, that's a real issue, isn't it? And of course, if it was an altruistic surrogacy in this country, then it would have to be somebody who was willing to provide the egg or provide the uterus, let's say, to gestate the fertilized egg.
But I think that Terry's made a very good point here about a friend carrying a child. There's a lot of people believe that if this is all done in the family, that makes it somehow better. I've heard from people who've married into traditional families where they feel they've almost been expected to carry a baby for somebody. Families are lovely, and we do tend to idealize them. They are the seat of a lot of abuse as well. They are a system like any other system. You think about the numbers of children who are sexually abused within the family by fathers, brothers, uncles, grandparents. We've learnt about all this over the last 30 or 40 years. There's going to be the similar levels of abuse in terms of surrogacy. So let's not idealize that. Very often power dynamics in a family are such that after somebody's carried a baby, if she consents, then the relationship that you may have been promised with that baby doesn't materialize. That's a very, very common complaint. They said we could be involved in the child's life, but then they moved away, or then they didn't get in touch, or it never happened. So we need to scotch that sort of particular "this is okay" myth, because it's not.
Yeah. Early on, Summer had a question, and that was that she was asking for clear, quick points that she can make that can put the issues over. Can you give us clear, quick points to say to those who believe it's their right to have biological children?
No one has a right to a child, otherwise we'd all have as many as we wanted. That's commodifying children to say you've had a right to them, isn't it? It's like saying I've got a right to go and buy something in a shop.
Yeah.
They are human beings. It's back to the question of who owns a child. And the only possible answer is the child owns the child. Once you can own a child, that child is a slave.
However, we also look over the Atlantic and we see that a lot of people in America, they have a belief that as parents have the right to control the destiny of their child, whether she has education of a certain manner or whether she's allowed to have an abortion or what have you. And that's a very controlling view of.
We've had the same thing here. It used to be until you were 21, you had to do what your parents said. My mother wasn't allowed to go to university because her father didn't think it was a good idea. She had a place, she couldn't go. So it's not just in America. That's just the case as society evolves. You know, women used to be completely under the control of their husband or father, and in some societies they pretty much still are.
This is true. And what I want to know is how are we going to deal with this on this matter? What have we got to do to move forward and to sort of see how we're going to deal with it? What would you say?
Well, we've got to campaign. I said do some activism. Letters are great, and we should all write letters. It's much more fun actually going on a little bit of activism and you know, shouting outside a door and singing a song and making some points and getting some pictures and having something for people to see. And then you feel involved and you're part of a group, and it's very empowering and liberating. Whereas if you write a letter, it's all very well and good, and we should all do it, and we do, but it's not somehow so gripping.
Jan, have you got a Facebook group that maybe people here can join to work on joint activism?
I think Stop Surrogacy now has, and we collaborate very, very much with them. So we would, rather than three different organisations all having a group, they have a group.
So we can go on Stop Surrogacy Now's Facebook page group and join it. Yeah,
and they're also on Twitter and so on as well.
Okay. That strikes me.
If anybody wants to do any activism in London, I live in London, then get in touch, you know, through the website, and it would be great to get a group together.
Oh, here's a link. Lisa has very kindly found us a link to this.
Jolly good.
Facebook, presumably that's Stop Surrogacy Now, Lisa, is it?
It's a discussion group.
Made a good point too.
A discussion group. Fantastic.
That's the Facebook group, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna.
People can see it. It is a private group.
Oh, I've gone out the Zoom now.
Okay, so we'd have to join that and get involved in the discussion. Thank you. That's worth copying. I think before we close tonight, if we can harvest this chat somehow, Liberal Voice of Women, I think it would be really useful. Una, Jane, you've got another point about research.
Yeah.
And the point is, men abuse their own female
It's a
relatives
good point.
merely because they are in a poor family, socially and financially isolated, and the female relatives are available, discussing abuse, but explicable.
Yeah, they do
Yeah.
it because they can.
Yes. So
And they will put women forward for surrogacy because they can.
Because if they can send them out to be prostitutes for them,
Yeah, of
they
course.
can send them to
It's a very, very
surrogates.
similar process.
Yeah.
Takes a lot longer.
It takes a lot longer, but maybe financially more rewarding for the pimp, in fact. Thanks for that, Ian, Jane. That's a really good point.
She's right.
Now, I want to know if anybody's got any more questions. We've had a load of information tonight. I think we probably need to process it. I hope you'll be able to take some of the links that I put in the chat and think about those, and definitely think about writing to the to your MP, because if the MPs suddenly get a flurry of letters, they're going to take it more seriously. They just get one. So if you know somebody else in your area with the same MP, get them to write their letters to your MP as well, so they take it seriously. Oh, just use save chat. Okay. And with all these things, talk to your neighbours, talk to your friends, ask them what they know about it. And of course, if you go to the Object Surrogacy link, or Nordic Model Now, or Stop Surrogacy Now, you'll get lots more information. And you can share that with your friends and colleagues, and have a really good discussion about it, and get them to write to their MPs. The more MPs that get letters, they will realise that people don't want this. I think it might be worth getting a YouGov poll, in fact, to see what people's responses would be. I don't know how you go around affording that, but if there's enough talk going on, and people writing the letters and MPs raising questions in the House, maybe WRN can get some articles in the press. They seem very successful at getting their research put forward. So maybe we should work with them as well, and try and get some real chat going on in the papers about it, because there's obviously a need for people to know more about it. Okay, let's see. There's another point in the chat. Okay, just use the save chat option at the bottom of the page. Yeah, we do need to find out the opinions and level of knowledge of MPs. Absolutely, because I don't suppose many people have contacted them yet, and that they may or may not be more or less willing to do that.
Amber's got a suggestion.
Go on, Amber.
Sorry. How about we arrange to talk to Conservative women?
I've already bent their ear.
I know a friend of mine who's actually going as MP in my local area. I think she's one of the deputy director of it. And the ones that I know are very against the ideology, particularly towards the children's side of it.
They are. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've bent Baroness Jenkins' ear. She's
Yeah, what about having a meeting or or a webinar or whatever with Conservative for Women, because they're very influential within the party, I assume.
Well, that's a great idea, Amber, and I know that Liberal Voice for Women are doing a lot of work behind the scenes with the other parties and the other, critical gender groups in all the other parties on just this sort of stuff. So I think that may be a really good, realisable opportunity for us.
You're getting into the core of them, the actual.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think that's something we'll probably talk about amongst our executive meeting.
Okay.
And see what we can bring out of that. That's a great idea. Thank you very much.
And I'm sure you know people there. If you don't, I can put them in touch with you, or vice versa.
Yeah, we've got links with all the parties.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
And we've had very good support. Yeah, Labour Women's Declaration and Green Party Women. We've worked with them, and Plaid Cymru and SNP Women as well. So I think there's a lot of cross-party working. available there. Thank you very much for that. That's great. Okay, so we'll think about what we should be doing in our party, and we'll talk to other people, other women in the other parties, and we'll see what we can do to get a campaign going. Maybe if we can talk to get an activity going on, maybe as a conference later on this year with all these different women's groups, grassroots groups. I don't mean the AstroTurf ones that have been captured by particular interests, but some grassroots groups talking about how to combat this move to change the surrogacy laws. That's a great idea. Thank you, everybody. Now, somebody's got the hand up. And Amber, is that a legacy hand or? Okay, that's great. Thank you. Has anybody else got any more questions? I'm conscious that, let's have a look at everybody here. I don't see any hands up. Una Jane, be careful to move quickly. There could be proposals. Well, there are proposals. The Law Commission has proposed that this be done. So the question will be whether they get the proposals in a white paper or a green paper first. But normally it used to be a green paper for legislative consultations, then a white paper of what the law would look like if it came as a bill, and then an actual bill being presented. So we do need to keep on top of this and see what's taking place. Does anybody else have any questions? Because if not, I'm going to say thank you to you all for taking part. I'm also going to suggest that you come back to our May event. That's going to take place a week later than normal, like tonight's did, because of the coronation bank holiday. So we'll next meet on Monday the 15th of May, and we're going to have a report from Wales about what the devolved government there is getting up to, probably with Cathy Larkman, Women's Rights Network Coordinator for Wales, and Merched Cymru representation as well. Do look out for the announcement or sign up to our website, liberalvoicewomen.org, and we'll send you the invitation as soon as it comes out. We also want to hear from you with any other policy-related issues or problems that you want us to raise. And I think this question of surrogacy is a really fruitful thing. I don't think anybody else here has been converted to be a pro-surrogacy person, having listened to what Janice has got to say. So thank you to Rachel, who's set up this this meeting tonight, the organizer of our Ticket Tailor Zoom meetings. Thanks to all of you for being part of this really interesting event, and most of all to our speaker tonight, Janice Williams from Object.
Very much.
Thank you for
Really
the
enjoyed it.
information. We've all learned a lot, and I think I'm going to have nightmares tonight. But thanks, everybody, and hope to see you next time.
Cheers. Bye.
Yes, thank you.